Good morning. I'm Paul Guenther, the chairman of the New York Philharmonic, and I'm pleased and honored to welcome you all here on the stage. This is a little bit different this year, to hear about the orchestra's 168th season. Permit me to just take a moment to outline the history of the New York Philharmonic because it's very relevant to today's occasion. 100 years ago, the New York Philharmonic entered a new era when we welcomed to the podium a new artistic leader, Gustav Mahler. He took over the directorship of this organization at a time of great transition. That was when the orchestra was transformed from being a musicians' collective to an institution that was structured in the modern way, with a board of directors and, importantly, a strong artistic leader. This set the stage for today's Philharmonic, which was created in 1928 when the two leading orchestras in New York City, the New York Philharmonic and the New York Symphony, merged. We were poised to take the world stage. And a great way to start that was on a tour, our first European tour in 1930, led by the incomparable Arturo Toscanini. 50 years after Mahler's appointment, a young American ascended to this increasingly important post. In 1958, Leonard Bernstein became the first conductor to be titled music director of the New York Philharmonic, and that is what he became, taking on a role that exceeded the programming of concerts by adding the tasks of visionary, educator, and advocate. In the decades that followed this tenure, a series of outstanding maestros have taken this great challenge, all of whom have left their own mark on the Philharmonic's development. The Boulez years, the Mehta years, the Mazur years, and most recently, the Mazel years. Different ideas from a whole succession of remarkable conductors. Today, we will hear the details of the first season created by our next music director, Alan Gilbert, who has some bold ideas of his own. It is with great personal pride, as a New Yorker, that I welcome the first native New Yorker to this position of musical leadership in our shared hometown. In fact, Alan brings to the job an almost innate connection with this orchestra. He is the son of two Philharmonic violinists, Michael Gilbert, who is retired, and Yoko Takabe, who is still with the orchestra. The rhythms of New York never leave someone who was born here. Once a New Yorker, always a New Yorker. Similarly, the musicianship and commitment to excellence that are intrinsic to the New York Philharmonic remain part of the DNA of a native New York Philharmoniker like Alan. The 21st Century Philharmonic continues to be vitally dedicated to giving the greatest performances of the greatest works, and to reaching out to the broadest possible audience. Steering this orchestra through today's difficult times is the best leader in the business, President and Executive Director Zarin Mehta. Among his many accomplishments was, of course, our trip to North Korea last year, and the forging of an unprecedented relationship with the first ever and exclusive global sponsor, Credit Suisse, whose remarkable support bolsters all our activities in home and around the world. A stellar orchestra with such friends made up of exemplary musicians benefiting from an active and forward-looking board of directors, as well as a particularly dedicated and imaginative staff, the Philharmonic is in impeccable form. This is the organization that Alan Gilbert will inherit in September of this year. No one could be a better fit. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, distinguished guests, please welcome the next music director of the New York Philharmonic, Alan Gilbert.
I'm here.
Thank goodness.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's tremendously exciting to be here, and it's great to see so many of you here, so many friends, so many colleagues. This is a day that I've looked forward to maybe the first thought I had wasn't looking forward to this when Zarin made the call asking me to come be the music director, but very soon after it, I really started to look forward to the day when it was possible to reveal our plans for the first season, and that is today. So thank you for coming to be here. We've decided to do this in a slightly different format from the way it's been done in the past. We wanted to invite you to our stage. We'd like the mood for this event to be that of your being in our home and our having an informal discussion about the things that we've come up with to do with the orchestra next year. The transition point from one music director to another is always crucial in any orchestra. And I feel a keen responsibility to pick up the orchestra in just the right way and carry it forward in just the right way. But I have to say that the sense of adventure, the sense of inquiry and enthusiasm and energy that is so palpable from within the organization already is a big help. The idea that I've been asked to come and take things in a new direction is obviously something that I think about all the time and we talk about all the time. But I have to say that, with Zarin and with Matías and with the wonderful musicians of the orchestra, with the people who work here, there's such a momentum, such a wave that I feel like I can just ride. So that's very gratifying. And I hope that's reflected in what we share with you today. As Paul mentioned, the orchestra is in impeccable form, and that's a great privilege and a great challenge as well. And I have to thank my predecessor, Mr. Mazel, for all the incredible work he's done, and the orchestra itself. It's an incredible group of musicians. And the fact that the programs that we're announcing today will be done by the New York Philharmonic is something that's obvious, but it really is incredibly exciting for me. So I guess now's a good time to ask the people with whom I work very closely. I've worked very closely in preparing the season to come up. I think Zarin and Matías will have a couple of words to say.
Thank you, Alan. And I can't be prouder today. It was a wonderful time to call Alan in the middle of the night in Tokyo to invite him to be music director. He was fast asleep. And he said, I think I have to call you back. I don't know what I'm hearing. Before I go further, I do want to tell you that there's something very unusual happening today. This press conference is going out live all over the world by a webcast, hence the two cameras over there. So smile when you look back and don't do anything you don't need to do. I suppose the question arises how we came to the conclusion that Alan was the right fit. Well, it's a matter of rapport principally with the musicians, but rapport with the city, with the staff, with me. It was obvious from the first time Alan guest conducted that something magical was happening on the stage. I remember I'd just come to New York at the time and saying, here's this young conductor making his debut. And it's a very unusual program he's chosen. The fact that he's chosen a Beethoven symphony makes absolute sense. But why the pastoral? Usually a young conductor wants to do something that makes the people stand up and cheer because of the way the Third Symphony or the Fifth Symphony ends. But he chose the pastoral. And that really showed me a lot about his innate sensibility and his musicianship. He continued in that kind of thoughtful programming. He did an Ives Fourth Symphony. In the same program, he finished with the Berg three pieces. He finished a major program with a Barber cello concerto and finished it with a Haydn symphony. All these things gave me a very, very strong impetus to think, not necessarily of him as a music director, but somebody that is a very deep person. And that's what evolved as we went along. And when we came to the conclusion internally with the committee that this should be our next music director, and when we talked to the musicians about it, there was absolutely no question, there was sort of open arms and enthusiasm. And I don't think there's been another music director that's been introduced to his musicians as the next music director of a major orchestra like ours behind the tent in Central Park. But that's what we did in 2007. And that was a memorable occasion. So, Alan, I think we are so happy that you're here. And this is going to be a great forward step for the New York Philharmonic. And personally, and on behalf of the musicians, I welcome you to your first season. I would like to... I'd like to ask my colleague Matías Tarnopolsky, who's the Vice President for Artistic Planning, to talk about what we have done since that fateful day in Central Park.
We've been pretty busy since that fateful day in Central Park. And in answer to your question, Zarin, rather than go into the specifics of the programs which Alan will be doing with you shortly, I was thinking, what's the overriding musical philosophy behind the programming decisions that Alan's taken this year? And really, he's taken us on a wonderful and compelling and tremendously engaging journey in the creation of these programs. And I look at it in two ways. One way is an evolution rather than a revolution, an evolution building on the incredible strengths of the orchestra, on the incredible strengths of the institution and its remarkable history, and crucially the remarkable orchestra that Alan inherits. And evolution by bringing in new elements that we'll hear about shortly, composer in residence and artist in residence and others. The other way I've been trying to articulate what Alan's programming philosophy could be is that of both museum and laboratory. I think we really want the New York Philharmonic to be a museum where you come and hear the great works of music beautifully performed, beautifully presented, and a laboratory where at the same time you can come and hear the most inventive and creative of the new work out there in the classical musical world. And you'll hear many elements of both during the course of this morning. So that in a nutshell encapsulates something of the thinking, for me at least, in the journey that Alan is taking us on in his first season as music director. Is that a fair description, Alan?
Alan on his own now.
I think so.
As he's used to being on the podium.
It always comes to that at some point. No, it's despite what Matías has said, I'm not going to sit up here and run down a list of the programs one by one. That information is in the packets that you have in front of you. But I will pull out a few programs that, in some sense, I hope are emblematic of the way we've been thinking about programming. There's no better place to start than the beginning, I guess. So I'll start with the opening period that we've planned for the season. I think significantly, the first event that we will present is actually before the official opening night of the season. There's something that we're calling a Philharmonic Day of Music, and that will happen on the 12th of September on a Saturday. And the idea for this day will be to open the doors of the hall and to welcome the people of New York, young and old, to come and meet us and see what we do. There are going to be a number of activities, some of which I think have still to be thought of, but many are already planned. We're going to start the day with a rehearsal, an open rehearsal of the Symphonie Fantastique, which is a piece that we will be playing on the opening night program. But we will have a true, honest-to-goodness working rehearsal that will be open and free to the public to come listen to. After that, there are going to be meetings and discussions. We want this to be welcoming for children. There are going to be projects that I think are interesting for all ages. People will be able to come in and meet the musicians, try instruments, hear mini concerts at various locations around the hall. I think a lot of exciting things, just something that will really, really open our doors, say this is our house, a little bit like today, but on a much broader basis and involving the musicians of the orchestra the culmination of the day will be a free performance of the Symphonie Fantastique in the evening. What time will that be? Do we know that? 8 o'clock. Normal concert time on that Saturday. We're always talking about ways in which we can include the city and make this orchestra something for the people of New York. This is a small way that this is a small example of ways that we're trying to do that. And I'm happy that that's the first thing that will happen in the season. The official open night program is one that I'm very proud of and very excited to present. This will be on Wednesday, the 16th, if I'm not mistaken. Wednesday, the 16th. And will be broadcast live from Lincoln Center. Is John here? John Goberman? Yeah. Thanks for coming. And thanks for the ongoing collaboration. It's going to be a little bit special program, I think it's fair to say. We're going to start out with a world premiere, a piece that I believe is just at the moment being written by Magnus Lindberg, someone whom you will hear from and about more in this conference, someone who's going to be very important in the Philharmonic family as composer in residence. But interestingly, this world premiere will be the first time, if I'm not mistaken, since 1962, in which the New York Philharmonic has presented a world premiere on its opening program. And in 1962, that was Leonard Bernstein conducting Aaron Copland's Connotations at the opening of this hall, Philharmonic Hall, as it was known then. So it's been a long time, and I think it's a very appropriate way to start the season. It really represents the sense of experimentation and unknown. We don't know, obviously, how the piece goes yet because it hasn't been written. But that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to look at things in a fresh way and just see where our inquiry leads us. And that will be the first piece that we play, I guess, after the Star-Spangled Banner, but the first official piece on the program. After that, a monumental 20th century work for soprano and orchestra, Messiaen, Poème pour me. Renee Fleming is a superstar, is not unfamiliar as the guest artist on opening night programs with orchestras, but to hear her do this piece is very, very exciting for me. I don't think it's overstating it to say that this performance could redefine the way people listen to this piece. It's often done by different kinds of sopranos, a more dramatic kind of soprano, and Renee's incredible elegance and way with the French language is really unusual, I think, and this is going to be an amazing experience. And the fact that they're two so-called newish works is important and represents something that will be definitely part of the programming that we do, a combination of pieces in what I hope is a fresh way. Continuing in the spirit of composers who were real revolutionaries and renegades, and Magnus, I include you in that with Messiaen as well, Berlioz, his Symphonie Fantastique, a piece that is just monumental and is as fresh today as it ever was. There's a lot of information we have to get through, but I will just take a brief moment to talk about some of the other programs that I'll do in my first 3 weeks stint here. What's happening, it's a great and exciting and intense way to start the season. We'll be here for 3 weeks and then we hit the road and we go directly on to Asia. But in those 3 weeks, it's not that we try to get all of our programming ideas into this short span of time because there's no way to do that. But I do think that the range of music that we've chosen represents something about a basic philosophy that we're trying to bring to the process of programming. Mahler Third Symphony, which is the first subscription piece I'm performing with the orchestra, is obviously a piece that the New York Philharmonic has played wonderfully for many, many years. I remember very well as a youngster coming to performances when I was 8 at the Mahler Festival that the orchestra gave, and then later on when in wonderful performances by Zubin, and more recently with Leonard Bernstein, the performances that were memorably recorded for Deutsche Grammophon. This piece, hearing it with this orchestra has been really an important part of my musical development, and to do it here it's a thrill. I haven't yet done a Mahler symphony with the orchestra. I'm looking forward to the spring, when I'm doing the first symphony of Mahler. But obviously, he's an important composer on so many levels for the orchestra. So that's coming up in the very first week of the season. We have, I think, an interesting combination of old and new and contrasting music with Ives and Beethoven. Emanuel Ax, a favorite guest artist here, will play the fourth concerto of Beethoven. And he's agreed to an experimental idea that I had of preceding it by Ives' The Unanswered Question. This piece ends with it ends in a kind of nowhere, and the Beethoven Fourth Piano Concerto starts nowhere. And so we decided to try to make those two nowheres the same and go without break from one piece into the next. So we'll see how that goes. But there's also the Ives Second Symphony on that program. There's a good deal of American music on the season. We wanted to get some important American music in the first weeks, so we'll be doing those Ives. After that, Schoenberg, I have this ongoing idea of an unnamed thread in the programming, which is Schoenberg is beautiful. And that is the first piece in this sort of secret line of programming that we'll be doing, Schoenberg, Pelléas and Mélisande, combined with the Brahms Violin Concerto with another of my favorite collaborators, Frank Peter Zimmermann. I'm sure I've gone on too long about these first weeks, but let's talk about the contemporary music scene. And Magnus, if you would come up and join me now. The initiative, welcome. The initiative of composer in residence is not brand new to the orchestra. I think it was back in the 80s that under Zubin's tenure there were composers in residence, Jacob Druckmann and David Del Tredici. Recently there hasn't been one, but what's important for me is the idea of a real composer in residence. And among the various artistic initiatives that Matías already referred to, this is certainly paramount. What I know that Magnus will bring, but what I was hoping to find when we started thinking of who it should be was someone who could really be an advocate not just for contemporary music, but for all music. And Magnus is, in my opinion, one of the most important and greatest composers working today. But what's so exciting is his encyclopedic knowledge of contemporary music and all music, and his advocacy for music in general is something that I really am happy he can bring to the organization. And if that were not enough already, he's an amazing conductor and pianist and will be appearing in those capacities as well. So perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about what you're looking forward to and how this position strikes you.
Yes, good morning. It's a fantastic privilege to have access to an apparatus like this, and the collaboration we've been doing with Alan in Europe now, having the possibility to work here is something that is very challenging for me, and the whole setup of during already one season having the possibility to write an opening piece for you, and then towards the end of the first season have a big second chance to present something new is not everyday reality for a composer. I think something of the kernel in my activity has always been evidently when you work as a composer, when you work like a Finnish composer, our tradition was to say that you have to be isolated. You sit out in the forest and you do your work. It's fine, but I'm too much of a social person. I need more contact to the music making, and now having this possibility of working here, very proud of having the possibility to work with so many young colleagues of mine. The new pieces we are going to present with the new music group over the season is something that is very essential and something that I'm proud of. Also, the work that we are going to do with some of my colleagues from many years already, with Marc-André Dalbavie and with Matías Pincher, two great colleagues of mine.
Matías is here.
Matías is here. is something that is amazing, having an orchestra like the New York Philharmonic being involved with so many projects of our day. I always like what Luciano Berio said once about an orchestra, that we need to feed the symphony orchestra with our time music, because otherwise they turn into museal institutes. I think it's fantastic to have access to our time. I'm not naive in saying that we should replace the whole season by only playing music of our time, of course not. But I think as long as there is a dialogue between our time and the past and the wonderful amount of beautiful music out there, is something that we should be very proud of.
We've gone. It's great to hear you speak like this, and I realize that we've gone a little bit out of order. I should probably talk a little bit about Contact, the series of new music that will be performed by the newly constituted new music ensemble in the orchestra. This is another of the important artistic initiatives that's starting next year, and it's something that I've long been interested in doing. I didn't have it in mind only as something to do with the New York Philharmonic. I've always thought that an orchestra should have a new music ensemble. So it was an obvious thing to try to do here. And again, I was able to base this idea and this interest in the idea on a real feeling of wanting to do this by the musicians themselves. There are many musicians who play a lot of contemporary music and are wonderfully expert at playing contemporary music, and to harness that energy and enthusiasm and actually create something that we do here under our banner is I think essential. Magnus will be very involved in curating this ensemble and has been very helpful in choosing composers. We have as our programs for this first season two programs entirely made up of world premieres, which is enormously exciting to me. Can you speak a little bit about some of the way you chose? Maybe we don't go through every single composer, but just what you've looked for in your experience as a teacher, which will also be brought to bear in what you do as composer in residence, working with the young composers in New York City.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic to have younger composers than myself. I'm there ready to steal every good idea I see. That's my very sort of self-conscious reason to have them around. We have great musicians. I think Sean Shepard and hello, good to see you, and Arthur Campela.
He's late.
He's late, okay. And composers like Arlen Sierra, composers like Lang, composers, all of them whom I've met over the years and got to know their music, and I think they represent the voices of our time. That is something really to be looking forward to. Evidently with Matías Pincher and Marc-André Dalbavie, two colleagues that we have shared so many thoughts about music over the years. With Marc-André Dalbavie we started to work in the mid-80s in IRCAM in Paris, and with Matías we've been seen all over the world over the years. So I think this is a beautiful package to be into. And of course, I'm deeply honored to have the possibility of write two pieces for you in the season. The very opening piece, I'm trying to make it short piece, but I'm going to put everything into it. My graduate piece in 1981 from the Sibelius Academy was a long story. Perhaps it gives you just an allegory of what I'm trying to do. I wrote an initial version of the piece which was like 40 minutes long, and then no one wanted to play the piece, so I thought that I need to do something to it. So I shortened it down to 12 minutes, but the funny thing was that none of the music disappeared. Everything was still there, even if the time became a fourth of the initial length. So with this opening piece, I'm trying to do something. I'm going to give you a kernel of the impossible mission of putting everything into a short, yet hopefully dramatic piece. I'm very much, as a composer, I let myself be influenced by the surrounding works in concerts. I think this is the most challenging and nice part of being involved with music making, that a concert is an event where all the pieces somehow feed each other, and being in the French connection with Messiaen and Berlioz is of course something that I'm very scared of, but I'm going to think about their pieces. I very much like to have the scores on my working table that I know that are going to be played with my music. So I'm hopefully not too obvious connections to these two masterworks, but I'm going to put in something from them. And of course, by the end of the season, being coupled together with Missa Solemnis, also a scary yet very inspiring model.
I'll just mention a couple of other facets of the appointment. It's 2 years long, and that will allow your social side to come into play, and you'll get to know the musicians, and the hope is obviously that the pieces that are written for the second year, and there will be more pieces written for the second year of the term, will be based on the personal relationships you've built up with the orchestra and the intimate knowledge of how people play and what kind of musicians there are. There are a couple of older pieces, as I mentioned, the Clarinet Concerto, which is one of my favorite pieces of yours, we're doing in Carnegie Hall with Kari Krikku, the great Finnish clarinet soloist, as well as Arena, an earlier piece. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to be starting a 3-week festival that will appear annually, and each year the hope or the design is to have these 3 weeks conducted by a single conductor, and the range of topics that these festivals will be based on is at this moment potentially infinite. For the first year, thrilled that Valery Gergiev has agreed to come conduct all the concerts, and it's going to be the music of Stravinsky. And in November, I sat down with Valery. He wasn't able to come today, but we had a nice chat, and I think we have a video. We can roll some tape of that conversation. Stravinsky is both Russian and American. There's definitely a French component to his music. Why have you decided to call this experience, this 3-week intensive immersion into his music, the Russian Stravinsky?
Even if I try very hard to forget that I myself, coming from Russian school, I myself lived most of my time in my life in St. Petersburg, where he famously was born and growing up. I am head of Mariinsky, where his father sang throughout all his career, and then he himself heard all the music he heard for the first time, he heard in the Mariinsky. I believe my way of performing music of Stravinsky is based on my experience with Mussorgsky operas, with Glinka or Rimsky-Korsakov and their orchestration, and of course symphonies of Tchaikovsky. So Russian Stravinsky maybe is also a valid way to call it, because himself, Igor Stravinsky, was saying at the end of his life that I think in Russian. I hear in Russian. My word is Russian. When he came back in 1962 to Soviet Union, he was asked, what did you enjoy in Leningrad most? He gave a very short answer, St. Petersburg.
You mentioned Mariinsky Theater, and that's obviously a very important part of your life. I think one of the highlights of this period with this Stravinsky Festival will be the guest participation of the chorus. Is there anything that you would highlight that we should look for and listen for?
Well, the chorus, Russian chorus singing in Russian, it's a very important factor. Normally it's a plus. The French chorus singing in French is also normally a plus. Not only words, not only understanding, not only color. It's this kind of energy and very special sonority which comes together with understanding the words and being part of this tradition. And if you take Mariinsky chorus, it's enough to say that this chorus sings by memory maybe 30 or 35 Russian operas. Maybe altogether some of the members sung in 50 Russian operas.
Are there any specific pieces that you are especially looking forward to, pieces that you haven't done as much that will be fresher for you?
It's a combination. It's a combination. If I go and conduct Petrushka and then I perform the Symphony of Beethoven, I am in the world of Petrushka feeling maybe quite comfortable. But if I conduct Firebird, Petrushka, Sacre, or Le Nos, then I have to find the differences. One of my favorites, big favorites, is Le Nos. It's a fantastic, fantastic score. And chorus is all important there, just all important. So the difference should be quite striking. And this will be the goal for me. We will play Oedipus Rex. I think Stravinsky was very interested in a myth because the power of characters, just the power of characters. But he also was interested in Russian fairy tale. So it will be very exciting to jump from Firebird to Greek tragedy and find why the same man was writing on such a different stories, such different items taken from world's literature, or Russian national literature. I think it will be a good color in this festival, the Greek color. I think it's important.
Well, I think, the idea of Stravinsky as a symphonist is not the first one that comes to my mind, and I think for most people, they think of him as a ballet composer and as someone who dealt with the Greek tragedies, all these other areas. But the fact is, his symphonies are wonderful pieces, and more of them are great than I think people realize.
And you know very well, these symphonies are part of repertoire of some of the best orchestras in the world. Yet one wishes always that, for example, Symphony in C should be performed more regularly. And then, of course, Symphony for Wind Instruments. It's a very, very Russian piece for wind instruments, brilliantly orchestrated, very enjoyable, fantastic sonorities, short, so will be seen as a brilliant and relatively exotic choice. Just to watch these few musicians on stage make this score sound so glorious, it will be quite a pleasure, I believe, for the public.
Well, I know the orchestra is looking forward enormously to your being with them again, and I'm sure it'll be a artistically triumphant period.
I hope that Stravinsky will be one of highlights of my own New York musical journey, and I'll do my best, of course, for that.
Thank you very much. In addition to the composer in residence, we are inviting Thomas Hampson to be the artist in residence. Again, the in residence part of this is really crucial, and what I was looking for in this case, again, is the total musician. And Tom is well known as one of the greatest singers in the world today, but he's also a tremendous scholar, a great teacher, and will bring a very, very wide range to what he does here. So, Tom, why don't you come join us and let's talk about that. Do you want to just talk about some of the different areas? I guess there's specific pieces that you will be singing with the orchestra, but importantly, there will be many other aspects to your participation.
Well, first of all, I want to say that it is as Magnus already said, it's a great privilege, it's a great challenge, it's a great honor to be part of this magnificent institution, to be part of your history, and more importantly, to say to you, to the beginning of what will be a glorious relationship we're all quite assured of. When you first called me and we talked about this idea of artist in resident, it was, well, what do you want me to do? So I went home and I made a bunch of lists. Remember when we got together and we started talking about repertoire? And I planned all 30 weeks. I don't know what the problem was. And I didn't even have to sing everything. It was, I just thought, and... So the challenge has been to get it down to 3 concerts or 4 concerts, which we've done, and of course try and find different things and different aspects of the vocal literature to highlight. It's a deep pleasure to invite and have Jurovsky here, coming for his debut with this orchestra with a magnificent work that is quite astonishingly seldom heard, the Lyric Symphony of Zemlinsky. I loved your idea, the metaphor of museum and laboratory, because in some ways I feel like I've been invited to put a white jacket on and try and get to the essence of what vocal literature can be inside of an institution that invites a lot of vocalists, but not necessarily deal with or have time to deal with, or want to have the energy to deal with all the layers behind what vocal literature can represent. And as you know, my passion in music is this idea. My favorite word period is metaphor. And I think so much of the musical journey, with and without words, is about the metaphor of one's personal imagining of their life. It's why arts and humanities seems to be so fundamentally important today. And I think it reinvigorates education. We also live at another time where we've probably had to never spend so much time not educating, but certainly edifying our public of what they're listening to perhaps for the first time. So we have this kind of spinning energy between public and performer that I feel very challenged and happy to be part of. And so the concerts, the repertoire themselves, the Lyric Symphony, Adams, one of our greatest composers here, greatest composers anywhere, but certainly from America, one of the iconic forces of musical understanding and literary understanding, Walt Whitman, will pull back from the stage, will exploit all the new technological world we live in, from webcasts to podcasts to videocasts to online information. There'll be a great panoply of information that hopefully people will be able to build their own index of how they relate to classical music, period. So these are kind of the things that are in the back of my mind that we're gestating together. The repertoire actually was the easier part.
Yeah, well, it's immensely gratifying to hear you speak this way, because the idea of lots of things coming together and of spinning circles that intersect in different ways with the different initiatives and the different areas of what we do is really crucial. And maybe this is a good time to announce one of those significant intersections. I believe this is the first time we're publicly announcing that Matías Pincher is going to write a piece for you for one of the new music concerts, which is fabulous. Thanks, Matías.
Very exciting. Very exciting.
For us, the hope is to have someone around who can bring this insight and this capacity to inspire these connections, both within the organization and with the audience. But also, it's a chance for Tom to show the range of his personalities, and with that in mind, you will be presenting a recital.
Yeah.
And
recital and American. That's why my tenure is only 1 year.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
We're gonna cover quite a gamut of repertoire from Zemlinsky to Cole Porter and Pincher back to probably Schubert and Schumann. It'll be great. It'll be great fun. The repertoire is part of it, but the repertoire really stands as a symbol for various prisms of how we look ourselves as people. And I think that's what in your programming is so exciting. It's an invigorating programming that you've offered. I think the idea of evolution, not revolution, is so adept to our times. We are in a time of enormous possibility. We talk so much and are so preoccupied with the negatives upon us and the economic factors of classical music, but in fact we've never lived at a more exciting time for the possibilities of outreach, for the possibilities of education, for the possibilities of recognition. We don't have to change people's minds. We get to form them. They have no clue. And this is very exciting. This is very, very exciting information.
Speak for yourself, Tom. No, but seriously, it's exactly why I think you're just the right person for this, and I'm looking forward to it. I think we've come up with a really nice array of activities.
Wonderful tour. Looking forward to going to Europe with you as well.
That's right. The Woundresser of Adams is going on.
The Woundresser across Central Europe will be a very, very major impact.
Yeah. That's great. And it's timely. Thank you very much, Tom.
Thanks.
Another highlight, and we're skipping over a lot of things. There's no way to talk about everything. Please read the materials, and you'll see what we're doing. But I really have to talk about Le Grand Macabre of Ligeti that we're doing. I think it's great. You know, we've been going through so many incarnations of the season, and sometimes we've had it in, sometimes we've had it out, and somehow it just didn't look right when it wasn't there. It's a piece that is monumental, important for the time we live in today. It's chaotic in a way that is I think true to life. Perhaps the most performed contemporary opera. I think there have been 30 different productions of the piece already. It's astonishing. It was written in the mid-'70s, and amazingly, never done in New York City. So this will be a New York premiere of the piece. And to realize this project, I've called on an old dear friend and collaborator, Doug Fitch, with whom I've done a number of projects. Doug, why don't you join us here? Doug is a total artist and will be directing and designing the production. And one of the things we started talking about years and years ago is ways to bring a visual element into concerts. It's a very open-ended discussion, and we haven't come even close to the end of it. But one of the ways that this batting around of ideas has manifested itself is various projects that we've done together, including Rheingold that we did in Stockholm. And we're talking about some abstract things, visual elements of music that it's not necessarily dramatic or programmatic. I would say Ligeti falls somewhere in between.
Yeah. Oh, I should speak into this, I suppose. Hello, good morning. Yeah, it's such an extraordinary object, this opera, and you call it perfect for our times. It is. It's sort of a sophisticated farce, a satire that goes into this realm of chaos where death appears and threatens to destroy everybody in one day with the help of a comet, and it doesn't work. He gets drunk and is unsuccessful, so I suppose you could call it some sort of a sophisticated farce or a sophistifarce or something like that, probably. But one of the great challenges here, and I'm just so incredibly grateful to you for inviting me to participate this way, is how do you bring a major opera into a concert hall and make it into something maybe you could call concert theater? There's no fly system, there's no deus ex machina, there's no backstage exactly, but there is this wonderful thing that you don't usually get when you go to the opera, and that is that you get to watch all of the instrumentalists playing on stage as well, which I just love that aspect of doing these kinds of projects. And so going back to one of the original projects that we did together, which was The Soldier's Tale. We brought it here and made a miniature theater and did it in miniature on the stage, and we're able to film that live and project it and make it much larger. So we're going to do something like that this time too.
I think it's great. I mean, going back to the Rheingold, it was in a way, and I mean this in the best sense, a traditionally staged opera. It was in the concert hall, but we built a platform behind, and there were players. And
that's right. We had a 60-foot-long tank of water, which is not so traditional, I suppose, on a concert stage. But what else?
No, but I wanted to bring up to emphasize what you said about the prominence of the orchestra. I loved especially when the descent into Nibelheim happened. There were lights under every orchestra member's chair, and suddenly there was this golden glow, and the musicians playing away. Suddenly you realized, those are the Nibelungen. It was such a brilliant touch. But this is very different, and I think it's an incredibly important way to use video. And I don't know if you noticed they're scrolling various images. Are these designs for this?
These are basically some images that I have made, and some of them are very much going to be used for sort of inspirational stuff for the opera. Right there is sort of a figure of Death himself thinking. Necrotsar, his name is. So I'm planning to put this miniature landscape, build this sort of miniature landscape of what they called what Ligeti invented called Bruegel Land. I can't imagine a better or a worse place to be, but it seems like a really exciting place to try to make. All along the front of the stage here, and singers and performers will be operating or inhabiting this strange landscape with their hands, their heads coming through little miniature gravestones and things like this, and all of this will be captured live as we tell the story.
Yeah, well, I've really enjoyed watching what Doug has been doing with this idea recently. What happens is you see many layers happening all at once. There's the actual event, there's the video filming of it, you see the people working the puppets and various things that are being filmed, so you're aware of the hand of the creator. At the same time, with a suspension of disbelief, you actually see as if it's a movie going on at the same time. So I think it's a great way to deal with the challenges.
Well, thank you. I like the fact that it feels to me like using a musical instrument, like playing a violin, doing something of that same scale, and a small object that we're able to make kind of instead of a musical instrument, sort of a visual instrument. So being able to share the stage with the orchestra in that way seems really exciting.
Right. Many of the singers for this project will come from the Met Opera Lindemann program and from the Young Artist program at Juilliard. So this is another way that the various worlds that we're trying to sort of touch are intersecting. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you. Thank
you. This whole process has been so all-encompassing and so intense. I found myself really deeply in the middle of it all. It's hard to find perspective sometimes and step back and look at the totality of what we've come up with. I'm very pleased with it, but I will ask for some help from Zarin now to help me step back and look and point out some things that he would like to highlight institutionally as well as programmatically. Can we just chat about some of the things that we're planning? Thanks, Zarin.
Do you want to talk about the season a little more, or do you think we've done enough of that?
I don't know. That's not for me. That's not for me to answer. Actually. No, there are some things that I think we should mention, but some of the artists that are coming, and why don't you take it for a while?
Well, there's going to be another world premiere. Christopher Rouse, who couldn't be with us, Alan will premiere his piece. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, Alan. Did Christopher tell you?
It's Russian.
Chisholm, in February. And H.K. Gruber is an unusual composer, a Viennese composer, and his piece Ariel with Håkan Hardenberger, the Swedish trumpeter whom Alan has worked with a lot, is coming. This is something we've been wanting to do for a while, and so that'll be towards the end of the season. A lot of wonderful conductors that are part of our, shall we say, family will be returning to us. Colin Davis, Kurt Mazur, Riccardo Muti, I'm delighted to say, will be with us for 5 weeks next year. Who else do we have? Helmut Rilling is coming back to do the Messiah with his Geschinger Kantorei chorus that he will bring from Stuttgart. David Robertson returns for a couple of weeks. Esa-Pekka Salonen will be back with us for a week. Former associate conductor Shen Shang will be with us. So there's a sort of real panoply of people, and also soloists like Lise Batiashvili, Josh Bell, Kavakos, who will play the Stravinsky Concerto. Waltraud Meyer will sing Jocasta in the Oedipus Rex with Anthony Dean Griffey. And Yefim Bronfman will be going on tour with us to Europe. The earlier tour that Alan mentioned in Asia will have Emanuel Ax and Frank-Peter Zimmermann, who will perform with us in the earlier part of the season as our soloists. That tour is going to take us to Tokyo, which of course is half home to Alan. And we will do 3 concerts there, including a young person's concert, a full young person's concert which Alan will host. Hopefully a little bit of Japanese will come out. And from there we will go to Korea, but the interesting and exciting place we go to after Korea is Hanoi in Vietnam. You might wonder why. Vietnam has an extraordinary tradition of classical music. They have an orchestra, of course, in each of the 2 major cities, and they have a beautiful opera house in Hanoi, which is a copy of the Palais Garnier in Paris. And I went there with Eric Latsky in October to look it over. We were greeted with extraordinary enthusiasm by not only our embassy, but by the Ministry of Culture. And we will do 2 concerts in the Opera House. Hopefully it will be televised throughout the country. And there will be educational programs there. In fact, our director of production, Miki Takabe, and our travel people are in Hanoi as we are speaking. And they're probably watching it on the website right now with the people from Vietnam. So hello, Mr. Tin. What else do we have?
Well, we should talk about some of the concerts that we're doing not in Avery Fisher Hall.
Well, Carnegie Hall we mentioned, then we will return to the Tillis Center in Long Island. We'll do the Missa Solemnis at the end of the season in the New Jersey Performing Arts Center. A free concert in St. John the Divine as usual, which Alan will conduct. And we will be making our debut in Caramore. Caramore is starting outside of the summer, a fall festival. And in early October, we will do an all Beethoven program in Caramore. And Michael Barrett, are you here? Oh, hi. Sorry, I have my back to you. So thank you for inviting us. We're looking forward to being in Caramore. Anything else?
Well, there's a lot. I mean,
in London, sorry, I just wanted to say Robert Van Leer from the Barbican is here. In London, we will play in the Barbican. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
And a very important element that we've talked to Alan since he started with us and started discussions is the involvement of Alan in the education programs. And as you have probably noticed, starting in this season, we will be doing a full week of education concerts on a back-to-back basis in the hall here, 6 concerts, which will be done in February this year. Next year, Alan will conduct that full week of education concerts and make himself available to the young people throughout the city in terms of education, which we are thrilled with. So, Alan, that's really wonderful.
The other young people's concerts will be conducted by our newly selected assistant conductor, Daniel Boyko. We did auditions earlier in the season, and the orchestra and I felt that it was absolutely clear who should have the job. It's really a great team, and I don't know if there's some procedural things. Eventually we'll get to questions.
I do want to talk about one thing. You've noticed that we have a new look, as you see behind you. This will be launched today and in our materials, but will become official at the end of the summer as the new season starts. This was developed by Paula Scher of Pentagram. Paula, I see you there. I think it's beautiful. Everybody loves it. I'm sure you all do too, so thank you. I also wanted to mention Eric Owens, who's here, who will be singing a couple of times with us who was wonderful in Dr. Atomic. And Paul mentioned our wonderful, wonderful relationship with Credit Suisse, which is quite extraordinary for any cultural organization, not only in these times, but forever. And I really am thrilled that Paul Calello of Credit Suisse. Paul, why don't you come up and join us for a minute? Will you say a few words?
Certainly. Well, Credit Suisse is a very proud sponsor of the New York Philharmonic, and we would like to very much welcome Alan, and we look forward to this coming season. Credit Suisse has been a supporter of the arts, in particular classical music, throughout our history. And times like these, economically challenging times like these, we think that's more important than ever that we reaffirm that support. And for us, for me personally, it's a wonderful distraction. I'd like to thank as institutions with over 150 years of history, we really strive for the commitment to quality, the innovation, and the integrity that the New York Philharmonic represents. I'd like to thank all of the members of the orchestra, and we'd like to thank Alan, Zarin, Paul, and all the members of the staff of the New York Philharmonic. You have in Credit Suisse an extraordinarily committed and proud and probably relevant for today's financial markets, financially strong global sponsor. So thank you. I look forward to this season. Thank you.
I'm glad to hear that.
Thanks a lot.
I'd like to take a moment to recognize one particular person who made great efforts to be here, and I'll let Zarin talk about why he's so important for the orchestra. I know that a lot of people came from far away to be here, but only one of us here won a Golden Globe yesterday.
Ladies and gentlemen, Alec Baldwin.
Congratulations.
Congratulations to you. It's going to be great. Thank you.
There was a wonderful article about Alec, and it mentioned his interest in classical music radio broadcasting.
Well, I'm just going to say the thing I love about the Philharmonic as an institution is that there's such bold risk takers, because you would normally think if you went into the entertainment world to get an announcer for your radio broadcast, you would go for Glenn Close or Sigourney Weaver or Kevin Kline. But no. The Philharmonic chose someone who was the star of one of the silliest, most inane TV shows to be the voice of the Philharmonic this season on the radio. And that process was a really wonderful process. They asked me, if you got this job, would you be able to do it? I said, yes, I take it very seriously. I said, like Magnus, I would go into the forest before every performance and think deep thoughts about each show and how I would perform my duties. And I'm very, very, very excited to be here because I'm a huge fan of classical music and collector of an audiophile devoted to classical music, and I have a newfound, relationship with the Philharmonic, and I'm very grateful to be here with you at the inception of your tenure here. And what else? I'm very excited. It's going to be great. Yeah.
Well, I just want to confirm that Alec will be the voice of the New York Philharmonic in its This Week Live at the New York Philharmonic radio broadcast, which go for 52 weeks throughout the country. And
I ask only one thing, though. I would like to be referred to as the announcer in residence from here on. Thank you.
Done.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
We're open for questions. We have nothing more to talk about. Yes. There's a microphone if you can wait so everybody can hear you.
Actually, the room acoustics are good enough here, so this shouldn't be necessary, but we do have the worldwide listeners to think of. I was cheered, Maestro, by your use of the term museum in a non-pejorative sense, particularly since orchestras have gotten heat from various disgruntled commentators about the degree to which they have become or are museums. But you seem to see the function of the orchestra in that way as one of its principal activities. And I'm interested, because obviously our gathering today is concerned with the new season which begins next fall. But this is only one of, I'm sure, a number of seasons that you're looking ahead to. And I'm very interested in knowing what your thoughts might be about how the functions of the museum and the workshop can be combined to revivify the concert-going experience on a continuing basis. Thank you.
Excellent, and well, it's almost a statement as much as a question. What you have said, and I think it's exactly right. Museum is pejorative only if you're talking about a bad museum, and I really take a lot of inspiration from the enormous success that museums seem to be having around the world these days. They're incredibly popular. They're constantly full. People seem to be able to spend hours there, and you see little kids there. They're really open for everybody, and the great museums are very much involved with encouraging the creation of new artwork, and I think that's right. I think that there's no shame in trying to be a museum in just the right way. But as we mentioned earlier, it's important to have a combination of a kind of experimental area, which is actually, maybe in fact it should go without saying, because maybe museums, the good museums do that anyway. But I would like to emphasize that in terms of playing music that has already been written, if you call that, if that's being a museum, then obviously that's what we do, and that's what we're proud to do. At the same time, we're very much involved with the immediacy of performing in the here and now, in the utter importance of helping composers to continue to do what they do, because it's the composers who are the real heroes in music. It's the most important thing that happens in music is the continuing creation of new music. And I really see it. I mean, I hope it's not too lofty to say that I hope that bringing in young composers, people who are just, hitting the scene, like Sean Shepard here, for example, it's an opportunity in a way that perhaps kind of came out of the blue, and it's just one person. I wish we could do 1,000 pieces by young composers. Obviously we can't, but if there's an element of hope that we can provide for people, and a sense that, oh yes, it's worth it to keep trying to compose it, to keep plugging away in that Finnish forest or wherever you happen to do your work, then that's a success, and that's part of what I think we can do as an orchestra. And for me it's very much about being a team, and I've tried to assemble a really fascinating group of musicians and people to help do this and to make it a vibrant and current institution, one that serves music first and foremost, but also serves the people of New York and by extension the people in a wider realm. It's very theoretical what I'm saying, but it's really what I believe in it, and these thoughts, I think it's fair to say, really inform all the conversations that we have all the time. Orchestras are amazing, and to hear music played live is something that you can't measure up to in any other way. I mean, I love listening to recordings myself, but there's just no substitute for seeing and hearing the people live. And so what orchestras do will always be important and will continue to be important for, I think, as long as we're around. The challenge is to keep it current and to make sure that music is presented in combinations that is constantly fresh and reveals new layers and new elements continuously. And with the great music, which we play and which we will hopefully help to inspire to continue to be written, there are infinite layers, and so we'll never run out of things to try to reveal.
Before we go to another question, there are a couple of other people I'd like to introduce. Each summer we play 6 concerts in Vail, and I'm delighted to welcome Jeannie Zuckerman, the artistic director of the Vail Festival. I have to say Vail is one of the highlights of our season. I'd also like to welcome Stefan Forsberg, who is Alan's colleague from the Royal Stockholm Philharmonic, who came down for this thing. Stefan, welcome to New York. And my predecessor in New York, Deborah Border. Deborah? I hope I haven't missed any other dignitaries. Any other questions? Yes. Oh, microphone.
Oh, thank you. I see from the education description that most of the programs are directed to 3rd through 12th graders. And I know you went to the same high school as my family, and I'm wondering what can be of interest to a 3rd grader in these programs that would also interest a 12th grader.
Well, first of all, I will say that there are some programs that I think can be interesting to 3rd graders and people who are long-time concert goers. But the real answer to your question is that we do different programs for different age groups, and we pitch the programs in different ways to the appropriate level.
The school day concerts are different, the 6 concerts. Okay. Anybody else? Oh, sorry.
Yes, I realize it's not an easy question necessarily, but you did something very different and important last year, which was the trip to North Korea. And I wondered if there's anything from that experience that you have the sense will inform and motivate or inspire what the orchestra does, the Philharmonic does in the future, whether it be this year or in the future, and if you've given any thought to that.
Well, North Korea was rather unique, but I have to say the New York Philharmonic has done those kind of forays, if you like, into what you would call non-musical areas. Just about 4 years ago, we went with the orchestra to Dresden and played in the Frauenkirche when it was rededicated after it was reconstructed. And that was also an extraordinarily moving experience for the musicians and Lauren to do Death and Transfiguration in that church. Everybody had tears just like they did in Korea. Going to Vietnam, to me, is a little bit of a healing process. And I'm sure the musicians and the people there feel the same way. We have done other things like that. We did the extraordinary Brahms Requiem from this stage with Tom Hampson after 9/11. And I think there's an extraordinary role for an orchestra to play in this area. And I do hope that orchestras and musicians go on doing that kind of thing, because that's really the only thing that brings people together. Thank you for asking.
Hi, Michelle Nichols from Reuters. Just a quick question on the subject that's been touched upon a few times, the financial crisis. What effect has that had so far on the orchestra, and what challenges do you think it will bring in the year ahead?
I think the main thing that we're concerned about is, frankly, the uncertainty. There's no question we're in a deep crisis. As far as the orchestra itself is concerned, we have not seen so far any fall off in our attendance. In fact, it's been extremely robust all through this period, and including the start of this year. We're obviously announcing the season now. We'll see how it sells for next year, whether people will make those kind of commitments. I think that in New York, I have a sense that this will continue. We haven't seen a drop-off in donations, and frankly, we're all keeping our fingers crossed. But we are very aware and vigilant. We are cutting anything right now that is not essential. And I don't mean artistically. Artistically, we have not made any changes. Otherwise, as Alan knows, I might talk to him about Le Grand Macabre, but I think that'll be the last thing we'll talk about after the reaction here. No, I think, we have to go on. I don't see that this crisis is going to go on for the next 20 years, and we have to ride out the storm and put that good face forward. I think people need the Philharmonic, and we're going to go on performing the way we have been. Okay? There was a gentleman here. No. Monica, come here afterwards, please. The gentleman has been waiting.
Thank you. A question for Maestro Gilbert. The Philharmonic is hardly unafraid of new music, but I wondered when it came to staffing this new music ensemble, which you're going to have, was it difficult? Was there a rush of volunteers? Is it going to be a permanent band, or will people rotate in and out? Will musicians be involved in programming, or will it be completely top down?
Well, a little bit of all of the above. As I said, the genesis for the idea, it's hard to pin down exactly where it came from, because there was a real desire among a good number of the musicians to do this. And the fact is that there have been fundamental shifts in the contract that has made it possible for us to do this in a completely fresh way. I won't bore you with details, but the fact that the musicians unanimously agreed to this, maybe it wasn't unanimously, but it was very, very close to unanimous, and I think that represents a real desire from the musicians, coming from the musicians to do this. They're absolutely involved in programming. Obviously, at the end of the day, I have to sign off on the programs, but there are people who are very connected to the contemporary music scene here, and we're absolutely consulting with them. As far as the makeup of the ensemble, it's going to shift around according to the music that's being played, and will be on a rotating basis from concert to concert. The idea now is to do it more or less on a volunteer basis, but it will rotate. And the fact is that there, other than a certain number of musicians that we've asked the composers to write for, we haven't specified which instruments that they write for. So I'm sure that the groups will be very, each piece will have a very different constitution in terms of the membership. But the fact is that it's been happily extremely easy for this idea to really gain momentum, because there is real belief in its importance, I think, from the top, as you mentioned, but also from all levels of the organization. And I actually think it's going to be a very important component of what we do. And I think you'll see a real sincerity of effort from the people, and a real belief in the project.
Oh, there's somebody in the back.
Yes, a question for Alan and Mr. Mehta. I see that you have some concerts, you're doing some concerts at Merkin Hall on Sundays, and I was wondering why aren't there more concerts on Sunday? People that I talk to say that would be a better day for them than weeknights.
The Sunday concerts are in Merkin Hall are chamber concerts that are part of a series we've had for about 20 years. The orchestra has, by contract, for the last 30 or 40 years, had Sundays off, and that's not something we are planning to change. I think this has gone on at least half an hour longer than I expected. Let's make this the last question.
Hi. Last year was successful about going to DPRK, and I want to ask you about this year, coming in March. How are you going to help out the orchestra from DPRK, or do you hear any situation about this?
I've heard rumors about them wanting to come here, but nothing concrete. So I don't think that this is something that I can talk about. This is something the State Department will determine. Thank you all for coming. It's been wonderful. And
Thank you. I just quickly add, thank you very much. It's really, really wonderful to see you all here. I'll continue the conversation individually out in the lobby, but for now, really, it's been nice talking with you.
Lunch is served. I think we did the right thing.
Okay.
Did it go well? Oh, yes. Didn't it drag?
Yes, it dragged.
Yes. Very busy. How are you? It's very exciting. Congratulations. Yes. Where is the announcement? It's gone. Why don't we put Alan in the middle?
And yes, Tom and Mr. Guenther might be in back. Yeah. If you can do a bit shoulder to shoulder, that's more like, yeah.
Yeah.